get this thing in landscape. Well, not landscape. Hello, Babs. There's another ghost story. I was going to keep reading this Open the Door book, but I don't have any time since I have to work earlier now, so it's bullshit. But we'll do this, bruv. Ghost story. Noddy from Holy Ghostbuster, a possum's encounters with the paranormal. Aelwyn Roberts. Guess that's that guy. Looks like Stephen King. Noddy. A barrister friend was telling me of his first good brief. It happened when a by-now famous chain store was in its infancy. The store had decided to manufacture its own sponge cake, and the packaging had been given extra care and attention. On the cardboard box container there was drawn in color a picture of a most scrumptious cake, and the other side showed a succulent cross-section of it, also in color. It showed the thin layer of chocolate, and under this, the slightly thicker golden layer of marzipan, then the sponge and the cream. And under the cream, resting on the final layer of sponge, was a small red blob of jam. It appears that some old biddy came to the new supermarket one day, bought one of their special cakes, took it home, and cut it down the middle just as the cake was cut in the picture on the box. There was the chocolate and the marzipan, and the sponge and the layer of cream and the sponge base, but no blob of jam. The jamless cake was reported to the Consumers Association, and proceedings were taken against the cake manufacturers. They had wrongly described the commodity they were selling, and giving a false description of anything that is being sold for money is an offense. Offense, not offense. I find the only people to evade prosecution for this kind of offense are estate agents. House after house, mansion after mansion, castle after castle has been advertised for sale, all according to them with vacant possession. Yet, when the buyer finds the house already occupied by spiritual tenants, the estate agent, unlike the old woman with the cake, is never prosecuted. And once he gets over the shock of it, the buyer usually decides to keep very quiet about it. Don't go to landscape, buddy. When I tell people that I could be going out to exorcise ghosts from someone's house 2 or 3 times a month, they're very often mystified. How is it, they ask, that I know of so many who are troubled with ghosts and have ghostly squatters in their homes, and yet they cannot think of a single acquaintance of their own who is troubled? The reason for this is that I am a priest and they are not. I know of a farmhouse in which a poltergeist goes on the rampage and smashes crockery twice and sometimes 3 times a year. Replacements cost in the region of £100 a year. Always it is the crockery she has bought into the house that is broken, never the crocks that belonged originally to the farm. The family buy the replacements and say nothing. They just buy old ones out of the antique store. I know of others who come and plead, practically on bended knee, for me to rid them of their ghosts, but they would say nothing to neighbors, not even to close family, when you have paid £50,000 for your semi and may be forced to sell again. It is always wise to guard your secret, lest it become known to the fickle property market. I have also thought there might be another reason for this reticence that people have about ghosts. People who have ghosts in their homes have often a peculiar sense of guilt. It is the same sense of guilt families feel when a close member is taken into a mental hospital. They will talk at length of Dad's prostate gland operation. You can often hear them boasting in the pub how their old man had his burnt off with laser beams and not cut off with a knife. But let the old man have post-op depression or senile dementia and be marched off to the psychiatric ward in the local hospital, and the family immediately closes rank. Whatever the reason, people who live in haunted houses don't shout it out among the people. You haven't been around social media, buddy. But telling a priest is different. A priest should be sympathetic, and there is something, too, about the confessional. The secret is somehow safe with a priest. Of course, it is also just remotely possible that a priest could help by using prayer and bell and candle and such things. So over the years, I have come to know of many houses that are haunted, and very often when the spiritual tenant has made himself a nuisance to the earthly tenant, I have been called in to arbitrate. Some people are psychic. They are born to be mediums, to have their senses turned to both this world and the next. They see things that others cannot see, and they hear things that others cannot hear. It is a psychic gift. Some people can divine water by holding a twig in their hand. Experience has shown me that I was never very richly endowed with these exciting gifts. This is why whenever I go ghost hunting, I have to ask a medium to come with me. The first ghost job I was ever asked to perform was in a large terraced house in an Anglesey town in 1950. 1850, yeah, Baba. The house belonged to Peter and Bridget. They had been married 6 years and had one little boy of 3, and a very heavy mortgage. It was Bridget who told me of their trouble. Oliver, the little boy, was allowed to stay up until Dad came home at about 6 p.m. He would have his romps and fun and games with Dad before his bath and be off to bed by 7 p.m. Peter and Bridget would have their evening meal, wash up together, and then sit down to snooze or watch the telly. 6 weeks before they consulted me, Oliver had started to come downstairs just when Big Ben was striking 9 for the news. He would just stand there with his thumb in his mouth and his eyes shut, saying nothing. At first, Bridget thought he was sleepwalking and picked him up and carried him back gently to his cot. But the next night, at the stroke of 9, little Oliver again made his appearance in the living room. Not crying, just standing there. At 8:45 the following night, Peter crept quietly to the nursery and sat near the cot. Oliver was fast asleep. Peter heard Big Ben striking 9 on the telly downstairs, and there was not a stir from the cot. He stayed another quarter of an hour, and then went downstairs to Bridget. All was quiet. It appears that a regular pattern of behavior followed. Every night that Peter went up to the nursery, Oliver slept undisturbed all night. But on the nights Peter stayed downstairs, Oliver turned up in the living room, thumb in his mouth and eyes closed. It was on one of these nights that Peter took him on his knee and waited for him to wake up. "Tell me, darling," he said, "why do you come out of bed like this every night?" The little boy answered, "Because the old man tells me to, Daddy." "Old man? What old man?" "The old man who wears the long nighties and the Noddy cap," said the little boy. "He comes to my bed and he wakes me up and he says, 'Go on, quick, quick now, shoo, shoo. Off you go to your mummy and daddy, shoo, shoo, quick, quick.' And so I come down to you." It was after this that Bridget had asked me if I could help. Many people have described me as a medium and an exorcist, but I am nothing of the kind. If there were such a thing as a psychic vibration meter, I would score 0. I have entered dozens of houses with mediums to see the poor things holding their heads in agony as strong psychic vibrations throb through their bodies. I have seen my medium friends pinned against walls by spiritual forces, but I have never in my life experienced a single vibe or been thrown about. A good medium can make a ghost show himself, and when this has happened and others have gasped at the sight with awe, I have remained blind. A ghost has to be pretty cheeky and extrovert before I become aware of his presence. I say this to explain why on all my ghost inquiry expeditions I have to be accompanied by a medium. It was my medium friend who suggested we go to the nursery in Peter and Bridget's house. We all tiptoed upstairs. I knew from the pained look on the medium's face that the vibrations were strong and were hurting him. Oliver was fast asleep in his little bed in the far corner of the room. The medium walked up to the bed, clutching and shaking his head as he got nearer. He then walked to each corner of the room and stood for a time in the corner opposite the bed. He whispered to us, "If we can move the little lad's bed to the corner, it'll be all right." Peter and I dutifully picked up the bed with Oliver in it and placed them both down where the medium indicated. Oliver kept on sucking his thumb, and the rest of us went downstairs. "I don't think you should be troubled again," said the medium. The little boy's bed was just in the ghost's path where it was. It will be all right now. This will probably go down as the quickest ghost job I have seen carried out. The whole thing took about 20 minutes. Flat, and although I checked several times with the parents, Oliver's nocturnal perambulations came to an end. Very professional. Came to an end on that particular night. I have come to the conclusion by now that ghosts can bore me. I never did read ghost stories or subscribe to psychic magazines. The greatest penalty of being a ghost hunter is that people come up to one on the high street to relate some corny incident they remember which happened to some distant member of their family. But the one thing I still enjoy about ghost huntings is the careful checking and double checking of everything one has seen and heard on a good night. When contact has been made, I must confess that for this kind of detective work I make full use of my clerical collar. After our pleasantly short visit to Peter and Bridget's house, I decided to call on my friend, the vicar of the parish. I told him about the problem we had come across in the house and asked him if he knew who the previous tenants were. He didn't, but he knew the charming old lady of 86 who lived next door and who had a wonderful memory. Armed with the tape recorder and my clerical collar, I decided to call on the old lady. The clerical collar gained instant admission to the house. Yes, the old lady remembered a good number of people at number 42. She herself had been born in 41 and had lived there ever since. People don't seem to stay in 42 for long, she said. I don't know why that is, but things are different these days. Young people seem to be always on the move, changing jobs and bettering themselves. She went through a large catalog of the previous tenants, the Browns and the Erskines and the Donovans and that lovely couple whose name she couldn't remember. After about an hour, we were down to the tenants of the 1900s. This was 1950, remember, and the old lady would have been 36 at the turn of the century. It must have been around 1900 when old Captain Lucas moved in, she said. He was a tiny little man and he had two lovely daughters, Lucille and Victoria. I pricked up my ears at this. The tiny little man part, not the daughters. Old Captain Lucas, it appeared, had made his fortune as a captain owner, trading the white man's grave, Africa. He had come to the town to retire and had brought his two daughters with him. There was no mention of a Mrs. Lucas. People assumed he was a widower. Lucille and Victoria had confided to their next-door neighbor many times that they were bored with their drab life in Wales and missed the colorful life of Liverpool. To make matters worse, the old man kept a jealous eye on his two lovely daughters. If one of them looked twice at a young man, their father would bristle. Miss Victoria had actually made friends with the young man, who, one day, decided to call on her at number 42. After he had left, her father had gone into a fit of temper. He is only a cheap fortune hunter, he ranted at her. If you dare even to set eyes on him again, I will disinherit you. Do you understand? Not a penny will you get if you even look at that whippersnapper again. Then poor Miss Lucille and Miss Victoria had been sent to their rooms. Did the Lucas family stay long, I asked. Oh, about 4 or 5 years, I would say, said my old lady. There was no stopping her now. The Lucas era was all flooding back. Old Captain Lucas was very fond of his drop of whiskey, very fond of his Be Joyful, Miss Lucille used to say, and the young ladies got into the habit of carrying bottles of whiskey into him. People say that shortly before his death, he used to drink 2 bottles a day. At that time, he didn't even dress himself, and the young ladies were afraid of anyone calling to see him. Because he was always drunk, I ventured. No, said the old lady. That was the funny thing about Captain Lucas. Drink didn't seem to affect him. I never once saw Captain Lucas drunk. Why were the girls ashamed then? I persisted. Well, because he used to be around the house all day in his long nightshirt and his funny cap. I knew we had arrived. Funny cap, I said. Yes, said my old friend. He would even go out into the gardens in his long nighties and his sleeping hat. And what kind of hat is a sleeping hat? I asked. Well, it is a long hat shaped like a corner with a tassel on top. A hat like a Noddy hat, I said to myself. So it's old, bad-tempered Captain Lucas who was shooting the little boy down to his parents every night. Shooing, not shooting him. It appears that after their father's private funeral, the Mrs. Lucas had come home packed their bags and gone off in a hansom cab to catch the 230 train. Is that the 230 train? To Liverpool. No one in town ever saw them or heard them again. I passed number 42 the other day. There was again a huge notice in the garden. House for sale with vacant possession. People should not be allowed to contravene the Trade Description Act. Thanks, bruv. Cheerio.